Hello, you're watching Context. I'm Orkan Amashov here to ask some relevant questions in pursuit of eliminating and elucidating answers. As Europe, the continent, grapples with parochial and wider challenges, recent elections held last Sunday appear to have, in a sense, only in a sense, reignited debate over the integrity of the democratic process, or in the case of Portugal, not necessarily about the integrity of the process as such, but as to the inherent difficulties associated with parliamentary democracy. Given that in the politically charged realm of claims and counterclaims, wherein any claim, however ill-conceived or lacking in the department of proper substantiation, could be allowed to flow freely enough to be given undeserved credence, one's timeless task should be one of listening carefully without drawing imminent conclusions. In Portugal, a fractured verdict has left no clear majority. No foreign interference has been confirmed or even claimed, but some form of discontent is undeniably rising. Meanwhile, in Poland, trust has come under direct fire. Days before the presidential vote, alleged Russian-backed cyber attacks hit government-linked platforms. Authorities also flagged suspicious foreign-funded political ads on social media. And just across the border in Romania, Telegram's founder, Pavel Durov, claims that France's intelligence chief tried to pressure him into silencing conservative voices online. Paris strongly denies this particular charge. From cyber manipulation to diplomatic overreach, is Europe prepared for this new frontier of electoral influence? Tonight on Context, we explore what is real, what could be deemed as real, even if it is not real in reality, what is rumored, and what is next. And joining me today from Brazil, São Paulo, is Diego Castro Silva to analyze the latest developments taking place across Europe, their implications, and fundamentally the cliche question, what is next for the continent and wider world. Diego, welcome to Context.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much indeed. My first question is going to be about Portugal. What the election results in Portugal reveal about voter sentiment in that particular country? As we understand, they're going to be minority government, and the way people voted, the fact that there is no clear evidence of majority government forming, what does this fragmentation actually signify about the current situation in Portugal and the political aspirations?
Well, in the particular case of Portugal, we can look at it in the context of the wider forces happening in democracies, Western democracies, let's say. There is a pocket of discontent that has been fuel to what is extreme right parties across the board. The case of Portugal is a result of that. And in a way, if you want to take a historical view, is similar in a way to what happened in the 70s of the last century with the extreme far left parties at that time. So how did the political system dealt with that? That responsibility laid mainly with the socialist parties at that time of devising different strategies to deal with the far left. In some cases, like France, they welcomed in government. In other cases, like Portugal, they maintained a policy of not entering any agreements with the far left. So you had different strategies in different European countries. Now the challenge is on the right and on the center-right parties to see how they can accommodate this kind of discontent in the political system. And in the case of Portugal, this responsibility now lies with the center-right party on how he engages the far right and the voters this far right represents. Does it welcome on the government? Does it maintain a policy of no agreements? Does it make an informal agreement in parliament? I mean, we are going to see what happens. I mean, but the challenge to center-right parties is relatively widespread in Europe, in countries that have a parliamentary system and where the right is heading the government.
Later we'll talk about Poland and Romania and the results attained there in those two countries. But one more question about Portugal. Why do you think Portugal has managed to avoid allegations of foreign meddling, which is being actually levied against the electoral system in Poland and Romania? Is it just far away from Russia? Is it because Portugal is not that consequential from Russia's perspective? Because it looks like that those countries who are physically, geographically closer to Russia are prone to this sort of allegations.
I think you are totally right. Portugal is not a central theater for European politics. And even Chega, which is the far-right party, has a fairly Atlantic position, and relatively nobody can win votes in Portugal being anti-European Union. So you don't have that kind of fracture in the Portuguese electorate to explore like you have in other countries.
And let's move into Poland, wherein situation remains slightly fluid. What have you made of that allegation made 2 days prior to the presidential elections? Do you find it convincing? And how would you evaluate the internal political situation in Poland, which is an important part of the European Union, a very important, crucial nation, which will probably, together with other nations, define the future of NATO alliance in Europe and also European Union's own future, but also quite, there's a strong presence of conservative, old-fashioned, sort of a nationalist views, which are not exactly far right, but still somewhat militate against that sort of European Union wherein nationality or national identity is subjugated to ground continental identity.
Well, that has been true of Polish history, at least in the 20th century, even starting with Podolski back in the 20s, that tension between a more European side and a more nationalistic part of Poland. I would say, I mean, in the case of Poland, I find totally credible that Russia tries to steer the pot. In the case of Poland, it's not so much as to come with there is no candidate that is pro-Russian. I mean, you cannot be a successful politician in Poland and being pro-Russian. So that does not exist. But as a way to create confusion and instability in Poland, of course the Russians are interested. Poland is a critical country in Europe, is a critical bulwark of security in Eastern Europe. So the more confused and unstable is the Polish political scene, the better for the Kremlin. So in that sense, I find it credible, not so much to support candidate A or B. Like I said, even the Ps, all major parties, all major candidates are not pro-Russian. That is not something you can be in Polish politics. But instability is something that it favors the Kremlin, and Kremlin would welcome an unstable political scene in Poland.
Well, the term pro-Russian is a very relative notion, of course. If a given government or given political party is not very enthusiastic about supporting his country's contribution to Ukraine's effort to defend itself, that would be construed as pro-Russian, but that particular party may have absolutely nothing to do with supporting Russia. And specifically, I want to hear about Romania, which is a very interesting situation there. The result is already confirmed. The Liberal mayor has defeated his Conservative opponent. I mean, quite a lot has happened in Romania over the past 4 or 5 months. What is your evaluation of what's happening in Romania, and what have you made of that claim made by the owner of Telegram about France or intelligence forces related to France trying to exercise pressure and actually silence conservative votes inside Romania?
To be honest, I find it hard to hear any claim of Durov as a credible one. Yeah. So I would not put my money on it. In any case, you are right. And by the way, you are, in the question of being pro-Ukraine or pro-support, you are right that That is a question relevant in Poland. Although I must say, even the current government, for example, will not, has stated very clearly that will not put troops in Ukraine. And even the previous government supported a lot Poland, which was from the other part, supported a lot Ukraine. So, but fair point. On the question of Romania, there I think Russia is more interested in promoting a particular view of Romanian politics that can be more sympathetic to the Kremlin. Also, it has consequences on Moldova, and Moldova is somewhat a strategic interest of Russia to promote mayhem in Eastern Europe. And that explains also this accusations of Russian meddling, what led to the previous annulment of the first round of elections. So there, as we had seen previously in Moldova, there I see very credible the accusations of Russian interference, of Russian support, because there I think you have some fertile ground to have ostensibly pro-Kremlin views like you had in Slovakia and Hungary.
And what do you think the countries, European countries, should make of this fundamental question? Elections must be free and people should be allowed to express their free opinion. And ultimately, whether you like the result of the election or not, whether that party which eventually comes to power as a result of the election is pro-Russian or anti-Russian or Russia neutral, doesn't really matter. People's choice and mandate must be respected. Do you find this fundamental challenge when it comes to letting people decide on their own, but at the same time sort of shaping the ultimate result by means of some legitimate means? This has been the fundamental question which lies at the heart of election interference, because there are some legitimate means leading to shaping public opinion, and there are certain means which are beyond the realm of legally acceptable. Do you think that at this juncture, when we look at what happened back in 2016 in the United States, also in the context of Brexit, with all of these allegations being made, that liminal line between what is legal and what is not legal is so delicate that quite often any claim, however sufficiently substantiated it may look like, will still be a matter for relative realm. It will be impossible to say whether that was a proper intervention or not.
Well, I think the question of foreign meddling is not the central point. I think that sometimes it is an easy cop-out for problems that are more structural. Let me put it this way. We live in a moment of extreme democratic instability. The question is not so much whether parties, are they pro-Russian, anti-Russian or whatever. That's not, for me, the central question. Is how much these parties, once they reach power, they want to abide to counter majoritarian institutions. And those are courts, press, and if you look, many of these parties tend to be very against not so much the democratic vote, but the institutions that counter majoritarian voting outcomes, like courts, like press, like universities. We are witnessing that in the United States now. This pro-majoritarian view, that's where the danger lies. Russia propaganda comes inside of existing fractures that already exist in society, and where you find politicians that are willingly accepting either implicit or explicit support. But the fractures already exist in the democratic countries, and they probably, you can trace the origin to the financial crisis of 2008, where this kind of discontent started to brew more intensively, because basically the financial crisis of 2008 was a censure, was a failure of the entire political establishment. And it is this establishment, be it either center-right or center-left, that is being put under challenge. And the view of populations that they don't have control. There is this sentiment of absence of control, be it migration, be it the economic outcomes, be it climate crisis. So people feel without power, and they turn into populist parties to have a semblance of control, of easy answers. So the problem is not, in the end, the problem is not so much they turn into these parties, is what is the intention of these parties once they go to power. If they abide by the rules, I mean, they can be successful or not, and they can be out of in the next election. The problem is some of these parties, you have the case of Hungary, when they come to power, they want to control the institutions that could somewhat limit their power. And there is where you have a serious problem.
Well, they would probably argue that those in Hungary, that actually the institution, the system there is already abused by some others, and they're actually freeing up the system, letting democracy work. I just you said something quite interesting about that democratic resilience, about those counter-majoritarian aspirations, the political parties espousing that sort of aspiration, coming to power and changing the system. In a sense, would it be fair to say that in the case of Portugal, wherein currently we observe what one may call political gridlock, actually that gridlock in itself testifies to the resilience, to the institutional resilience of the existing system there, because no one can take over?
Well, I wouldn't put exactly like that, because the counter-majoritarian institutions, because people tend to think about democracies only, but we are talking about liberal democracies, and that is where I gave you the example of Hungary, because when you talk about democracies, you are talking about the liberal democracies. Everybody concentrates on the votes. The votes, of course, are important because they are the expression of popular will, but they are not 100% of the system. The other part of the system are the institutions that are not elected, for example, like courts, that are there to control what the will of the people does. Otherwise, you live in a dictator of the majority. What prevents democracy from becoming a dictator of the majority is the institutions, courts, press, other institutions that are there to control the executive power. In the case, oh, sorry.
So would it be fair to say that in a liberal democracy, people's choice is limited by by predetermined contours, and that predetermined contours effectively mean that nothing that people decide on could go beyond the realm of the acceptable?
But the realm of the acceptable is not subjective. Is, for example, the Constitution. The Constitution is there to prevent that you have power, but you cannot do whatever you want.
Sure. Unless
you have an extreme majority, like 4/5 or 2/3, different countries opt for different majorities, then yes, you can change the Constitution. You can change the rule of games. You cannot be the best team in football and then decide to play basketball. That is not possible. So that is where courts especially are there to prevent this abuse. And then also institutions that exist in civil society that guarantee a certain kind of transparency that allows then the society to do conscious decisions. And for example, journalism plays a huge role in that regard, but not only journalism, universities and research centers and even the business community plays that role. So those are roles that are essential to prevent the dictator of the majority, which is something some of these populist parties like to espouse as a true democracy. But like in Venezuela of Chavez or the Hungary of Orban, having full control of every part of the state is not full democracy. I would say is a very diseased form of democracy.
It's a very fascinating subject and quite an interesting one. We started our conversation with practical examples related to Portugal, Poland and Romania, and ended up having a wider, broad discussion about the essence of democracy. And I'm so grateful to you, Diogo. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've just conversed with Diogo Costa Silva, who joined us from São Paulo, Brazil, about the latest developments taking place in Portugal and Poland and Romania about the election results and what actually the cumulative impact of those results mean for democracy in general. Well, from cyber interference to pressure on tech platforms like Telegram, the battlefield in terms of democracy seems to have shifted. Whether in Warsaw or Lisbon, the challenge remains very much the same: defend democracy without becoming its casualty. We'll keep watching the developments. See you very soon.